Welcome, finance and marketing leaders, to our latest B2B in the Black video series. What good looks like in a post-COVID world. I'm Thad Kalo, CEO of Business Online and founder of B2B in the Black, an executive forum that aligns B2B finance and marketing leaders to unlock growth. And today, I will be speaking with Christine Gately Evans, former CMO of Renovate America and VP of Marketing at Pet Desk, and today, brand consultant and advisors to some of the most storied and respected brands we all know. And I've had the great pleasure to get to know Christine over the past couple of years. And she's one of the most dynamic professionals in the business with a wide range of talents from strategic development to understanding the nuances of tactical execution. But in all her roles and experience, understanding the buyer behavior has always been a priority to Christine. Welcome, Christine. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Thad. You're too generous. I really enjoyed getting to know your team and you over the last couple of years, and really appreciate the kind introduction, but I'm excited to dig in today.
That was an easy one, no problem. Okay, so let's set the stage for this important conversation we're gonna have, Christine. In this post-COVID world, we know leadership must create new strategies and tactics to meet the moment, right? Turn these challenges into opportunities, and incremental thinking will no longer cut it. Businesses need that long-term plan to create true digital transformation we all seek. And Christine, you believe, as I understand, now is an essential time to take a real hard look at what we knew as truth and question it, that conventional wisdom. So to kick this off, my first question to you is, what truth today is most critical that we question in this exact moment, and why?
One, really good question, but everyone's been consuming a lot of content. And I don't think, a lot of the things that we're going to anchor on today about changing consumer behaviors is new information. But I think when you look at consumer behaviors and how the at-home and in-office experience has now blurred lines into professional expectations, that's where the intersection, I think, becomes really interesting. And it's happening real time. So understanding it isn't something that's easy to track down, isn't easy to put a finger on. And the best things you can put in place are talking to your teams, getting close to the floor, getting close to the conversations to understand what's going on with your customer base, but also put some guardrails in place. It's not a free-for-all. What do you want to ask? What do you want to understand better?
I love it. So that's a lot to unpack. So let's start with this. And I love this notion. And it's a red thread that's been running through many of these conversations, which is COVID has really humanized us all, right? Like the dogs are interrupting our big, important board meetings. Our babies are crying in the background. And we all understand like we're human beings, right? And what I'm hearing and what you just mentioned is that also translates into how we should be thinking about reaching them at home, on the road, when they're, traveling or doing whatever it is they need to do. In a unique and different way as human beings versus just prospects or accounts as we think about it in specifically in the B2B world, right?
Yep. So there was a recent Forbes article that talked about humanizing those experiences, and people have Zoom fatigue. They do want to get together, but the more personal conversations can get and time and really listening to what the needs are, the better position you're going to be as a brand to, one, build a relationship, but also build some loyalty, which we know also took a big dive during COVID.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So I guess, another big question I would ask is, where do you begin to kind of build the arsenal of strategies and tactics that are necessary to get that understanding, right? Because we all know best relationships are built with understanding first before being understood, right? And so there's so many different areas we can reach into to figure that out. But how do you think about effectively better understanding your customers and their behaviors?
Right. One, I'm going to put it in easy steps. So if you think about it as 4 easy steps. Discovery, audit everything you have access to, website analytics, search analytics, pipeline velocity, NPS, your win-loss analysis, all of the things you've got access to in your organization, but also look at market trends, tap into industry publications, partners. Even if you aren't actively looking at spend today, those partners know that you will have a budget. So they're willing to share data and information and trends they're seeing in the market if they're not exposing it already through white papers, research, webinars, all that great stuff. And then get close to your customers. So your service and sales teams are the ones that are having those daily conversations and have a pulse on what's going on. And that's absolutely the place to start. So discovery, think about it that way. The second place is based on the discovery, you're going to have some thoughts. You're going to have some ideas about what may have changed, what may be seen or insights from the data, which turn into hypothesis. So start with sales and marketing teams. Those groups have a really good handle on, one, what was previous state and what the data may be saying with future state, or what you're trying to assess as future state. And then with a short list of questions to answer, start secondary research. There is so much information out there that's accessible that you can look at what is going to impact the business the greatest, and try to get through secondary research at least a refinement of now your list of hypotheses or questions. And then if you haven't made progress, consider proprietary research. There are so many different formats of research now that you can include, whether that's one-on-one interviews with customers, whether it's a survey, whether you pull in a third party or not, whether you form an advisory board that's longer term. We all have a lot of different tools now to conduct proprietary research. And then fourth, this is really important, but listen, learn, and pivot, adjust. Don't wait for the big reveal or the curtain to be pulled back on all these great, big, huge business pivotal insights. Learn, adjust, and pivot.
So stay into that last point, operate in digital speed, make the adjustments you need to make before you get caught behind. But, let me press on a couple of those areas, because I think that's really great advice and a great kind of 4-step process for thinking about how we better understand who our customers are and react to that. The one thing I think is really interesting, actually lots interesting in what you just shared, but one of the first things I would love to tease out is, these conversations with sales, right? And the fact that they're in front of customers. So 2 questions. Number 1 is, have you seen any interesting, data or conversations come out from colleagues or your own conversations from the folks in sales? And if so, what are those things that are changing that are most shocking or unique or different that we should be thinking about today?
I'll try to be concise, because I feel like there have been a lot of little nuggets that when you stream them together or connect the dots equal a shift. And one of it is the time inbound inquiries are coming. They're coming not during business hours a lot. So people are working late, they're working early, they're making adjustments to their work schedule based on their home schedule now, because people are having to juggle multiple tasks. So that's one big thing. That's kind of concept of always on customer journey or customer cycle has come through as a thread. The other one that has been interesting is, in the first few months, there was a resistance to having conversations at all, whether that would be about switching software, expanding tool sets, things like that. It just didn't have time, especially in the vet industry. And that fatigue has gotten to a point of exasperation. They're extremely worn down, beat down, and it's less about what I can sell you and more about how I can help. And that conversation builds more trust. And when they are ready to talk and they're talking on their own terms, they're creating a purchase cycle that is longer. It's unique. Sometimes it's shorter. So it's gone all over the map a little bit. But the how I can help in the content that you carry on your website, on the things that are coming up as white papers, sending those to prospects and customers does a huge service to that relationship.
I love it, right? Like how I can help, right? I mean, it seems so simple, but it is one of the hardest things for businesses to do, because we have goals, we have needs, we have quotas to hit, and it's about how can I get you in and close you? But the way to do that, I think what you're suggesting, correct me if I'm wrong, is like, if you can give first and deliver true reciprocity, you've earned the right to a sales conversation down the road, but you got to nail it how I can help and actually deliver something of value.
Absolutely. And if you think about it in personal relationships, if somebody's trying to get you to do something, a lot of times it feels self-serving and it's not about them, it's about you. So turn the conversation around and make it about them and really understand where they're at and where to meet them where they're at.
Yeah, I love it. And the other thing you said that I think is interesting is, obviously you need to go and understand the data that you have, first and third party data, across the board, right? And unpack that and drive insights, which I think everyone is really working really hard to do. But also this notion of outside research, right? Tertiary research with analysts and others, where they can help you get a better understanding, whether they're doing focus groups or questions and surveys. And, I love to understand how you're thinking about that. Are there ways to get it done in an inexpensive way on a shoestring budget, because you need to get it out the door quickly? And where would you start?
They're, again, proprietary tools, endless number. Some require third parties to engage, some don't. But the first thing I would look at is, what is the impact of the decision? Is it substantial business outlay budget or income of revenue that's anticipated as a result of the decision? And that to me is a marker for pulling in a third party that's got more experience and more knowledge. It can really help institute best practices in what you're doing, because that decision has a lot of value when it comes to monetary value or even time and resources at your organization. So that would be the first thing to do before you know whether to handle it in-house or out-of-house. On the list of questions that you pull together with your internal team, if you're able to get in front of customers one-on-one to understand the dynamics within those questions, it might take some questions off your list, and it might reform some of those questions. So if you do want to get a bigger body of insights, which would be more your quantitative research or your survey formats, you have a good understanding that you're asking the right questions. So a survey is never going to ask the right question for you. That has to come from your internal teams and the work you do before you determine if you need to go out of house or stay in house.
Yeah, super strategic. And I'm going to pivot into a very tactical question. A lot of folks are saying just use a free survey tool. Is that something that you believe in and have done? And is there value there?
I absolutely have used in-house survey tools, and even a lot of tech stacks come with survey tools that you're not aware of. So always look at your existing tech stack, see if they have services like that. A lot of the feedback mechanisms and technologies that are in B2B SaaS absolutely have built-in survey or feedback mechanisms. And on the online tools that are available, they come with resources like templates, best practices. But at the core of it, those are not going to know the questions to ask. That's really your responsibility. And understand that takes time. So if you haven't done it before, you're embarking on a new understanding of how to ask a question, how to interpret the data, the order of the questions, but also a new tool. So the tools are super, what you see is what you get in turnkey, but you do have to allow the time in order for that to get done well.
Yeah. And I also wonder about like the questions we ask, because I often find that we come in with a hypothesis that we're looking to prove, and we're asking the questions that funnel the responses in that direction versus like truly trying to unearth insights around your customers' needs so you can better understand how to help. So when you think about that, a couple questions here. Number one is, how do you ensure that you're truly asking the right questions to get to an insight versus just validate an assumption?
That is a really hard thing and something that takes experience. And when you have a simple answer that can help guide a subsequent conversation, if you need a conversation and you're trying to get that in a survey, you're looking at the wrong question.
Yep.
Surveys are good for short, succinct, either Likert scale somewhat to extremes, or gauge on perspective, but it doesn't give you deep insights like a conversation with a customer. Even if you have open ends, you've got to interpret that data, you've got to sort it, you've got to keyword search it. That takes a lot to ingest open-end questions. So if you find yourself taking the questions and going through them yourselves and answering them and not getting to an actionable set of insights, you probably are using the wrong format of research.
That's great. And when you think about extraction of insights from any one of these data, whether they're one-to-one conversations, whether it's survey, whether it's third-party research, you name it, how do you think about how you drill down into the core insight? Because that core insight is the most important thing. The data itself is frankly kind of worthless to some degree, but it's the insights we can extract from the data. And I'm always interested in experienced marketers like yourself, Christine, and how they synthesize and get to that moment of aha to then leverage to deliver the help that your customers need to earn the conversation.
That is a really good question, and one that I would summarize in connecting the dots that you're seeing with trends in actions, behaviors, and data can help you formulate an idea. And that idea isn't necessarily a single answer. It's almost across multiple questions in trends and data that can help you understand truly what is being seen as a change or a shift or an unearthing of that insight. And I would summarize in insights are a collection of data points that equal a logical progression of thought.
Yeah.
And some of the best researchers can connect those dots that seem unconnected. And that is a real gift. It is a hard talent to find. And sometimes that's why you need a third party to come in and help you.
Yeah. An outside in approach where you're so baked in your own conclusion or your own desire to drive a conclusion that you can't break from that. I think that's really great advice. And then the types of skill sets you need to do that. I mean, are you looking at like data scientists, or are you just looking at good business analysts that help you to connect those dots where these folks are just skilled at that level?
There are data scientists who are really good at interpreting the data you give them and the questions you give them. And they are extremely deft at unearthing information from what seems like a sea of data. Then there are those that can take data and information and give you one succinct finding out of that a mass of data. That comes from rigor in planning and strategy, rigor in understanding the psychology of how people tick, the understanding of how they answer, but how they behave differently, and comes with experience. So I'd say the traits you want to look at in somebody that's got that skill is rooted in strategy and planning, rooted in data research and insights, and then a fair understanding of psychology.
It's interesting because when you describe those traits, often you don't find that in a single individual. You need a collective group of people to come together and almost ideate around what's being presented and why. And as you peel back the layers of the onion, everyone's contributing to that core insight. And I've seen that to be very fruitful in trying to find that aha moment.
Yeah, absolutely. The more you can pressure test in a safe environment, the more usable and actionable results you're going to have from the information that you're gathering. And I've also seen instances where a lot of people are still saying, I think, and you want to change that conversation to I know.
Yep.
And the I know is where the real peeling back of the onion and unearthing of that singular thing that can really break through and create great marketing strategy, but also get great work.
Yeah, I love it. And, as we talk about, what types of data we want to kind of pull into this holistic view of what we need to question, certainly we can look at third-party research, right? And I think I'd love to get your opinion on that. But I'd also like to understand how you think about the customer advisory panel and its general purpose and how that serves to drive you in the right direction of unearthing these insights.
I don't know how many listeners or watchers right now have been invited to an insights group. It makes you feel great. You're like, my opinion's important. And it's usually with a brand that you have a affinity for. I got one this morning from Food and Wine. And I was like, yeah, I would love to be a Food and Wine insider. And the purpose that they built that advisory board on was clear to me. The ask was clear to me. And that made the exchange of value something that I would be interested in. So if you think about the inverse side, define the purpose of your group. What are you trying to achieve? Who to include and who to exclude? Think about diversity in your segments in that group and make sure it's diverse to give you a diverse point of view. And then what's that value exchange? So I'm asking for something of this group. Participation, feedback, experiences, all that great stuff. But what are you giving them in exchange? Because they're giving you your time and their points of view, which has high value. And then fourth, which often is a miss, who manages that group and what's the budget? And everyone across the organization is going to want a piece of that pie. They're going to want their one thing that they're responsible for infused into that group, and they want an outcome. So defining what it is and what it isn't is really important, but having one person manage it and then allocating a budget, whether it's for premiums, whether it's for, coffee cards, lunch cards, little things like that can mean a lot in the short term. But the long-term value that you provide can include soft cost your organization and really make this group feel special. Things like early access to release of new features, things like content that would have been paid for and giving it to them for free, something that can help their business. So things like that are, I think, good components to think about if you're considering bringing on a group to help act as an advisory panel for your organization.
I love it. That's a very holistic answer to the question, as well as, drives back to this notion of reciprocity. You got to give to get, and you got to deliver something of equal value. And I think, folks will dig in when you do. And I love that. Okay, last question for you, Christine. We started this session by talking about testing the truths that we know are conventional wisdom, right? To challenge ourselves. What have you found in your experience, or maybe working with your colleagues and listening to their stories, is worthy of challenging or testing with the board or the executive team? Like, what are the things that they believe to be true, but are worth pushing back on? And maybe a side question is, how do you push back?
That is a really good question. I would frame it as everyone has an opinion, and when it comes to the board and your executive team, they're invested. And there could be an opinion that a certain group is your target market. And you do a segmentation study and an attitudes and behavior study, and you find out that that segment isn't necessarily super thrilled or jazzed about what you offer as a key value prop. So going back to that person and having that conversation, one, is rooted in data. Two, they probably, hopefully, had a heads up that you're doing the research in the first place. And three, your interest is in their interest in building a company that is rooted in information that can help it flourish and grow. So the foundation and building blocks of research and insight are about your segmentation and about your attitudes and behaviors and key customer profiles. Having that solid foundation allows you to continue to build on it, whether or not it means doing product studies, messaging studies. All of that stuff makes stronger business decisions and ultimately benefits the business. So I think anchoring on, you're both out for the best outcomes versus my opinion and your opinion, or the data or not the data.
I love it. It's funny. We've been doing a lot of work through the lens of account-based marketing, and many of our customers who are working on their total addressable market and their target account list and their ideal customer profile are banking on relationships of the past from the sales team to identify that list, right? And what we found when you do a sales look back and you look forward around your value proposition, matching the needs of your prospects, is that's often not the case. And it's a very hard thing to address because a lot of those folks are rooted in those relationships and those opportunities to sell, but it may not be your best path forward. So I love that. I'll validate that assumption all day long, that that's a big thing that folks need to question right now, especially all the way at the C-level and board, because if you don't pick the right target, it's going to be much harder to hit the mark.
Right. It was funny, before we had this conversation, I asked a couple of my research partners what the biggest misses are. And, it is not a quantitative study I did, but it was interesting. They both came back with the same miss, and it relates to what we just talked about. And what they find is mistakes don't focus on foundation research. They're so interested in getting to the product experience, or is this campaign better than that campaign? And often not understanding the attitudes and usage, the key drivers, and your segmentation, the underpinnings for anything that happens down the line are there.
Yes.
So you could be testing the right message against the wrong audience. Testing materials are designed to solve jobs for marketplace drivers that your customers don't care about.
Yep.
So you're just throwing money at a problem that doesn't exist.
That's a great insight. I love it. And with that, I'm going to thank you for your time. This was a fantastic conversation. As always, I truly enjoyed it. And the B2B in the Black community appreciates your contribution. Thank you, Christine.
Thanks, Thad.